Welcome back, everybody. Coast to Coast, This Week in America. Nightmares by Paul Kasper will keep you wanting to read more. An insightful perspective that only someone who has experienced the traumas of war could have. What soldiers went through during the Vietnam War. Nightmares is about the 9th Infantry Division. The unit goes on patrol looking for Viet Cong or NVA regulars. They are put under fire, lost members while out. They learn to survive mentally and physically, as deaths on both sides of the war could happen at any moment. It is fiction, but it's based on facts. Paul Kasper served proudly with the 9th Infantry Division during 67 and 68. He still has shrapnel in his leg after all these years, totally disabled with limited mobility. Paul has spent many years as a veterans advocate, helping veterans and their families obtain their benefits. Paul Kasper, the author of Nightmares, is our guest on This Week in America. Paul, it's a pleasure, sir, to welcome you to the program. Thanks for being with us.
I thank you, sir, for the time.
It is such a remarkable book that you've written, Nightmares. Why did you decide to publish the book now after 50 plus years? What was the inspiration in publishing the book at this time?
I have 6 children, and I watched them growing up, and in their history books, it got smaller and smaller and smaller where they discussed the Vietnam War. And so when I started writing it, it was down to about 2 paragraphs for the Vietnam War. Korean War as well, too, where World War II took up almost a whole chapter. So I said, it's time. And when I wrote it, I made sure there were no swear words, no derogatory statements.
Right.
So that the schools couldn't say, you can't have that here. Hopefully I'll get nice and they'll get it in the libraries.
Well, and they need to, yes, most definitely.
Yeah, and that's what it was, to let them experience what is now their grandfathers went through, to see that side of the story. What day to day was like. I think I sent you one of the graphics that says that old man with the cane, was at one time the biggest badass there ever was.
Exactly, yes. That the photos in the book are remarkable. Talk about those. Are these genuine photographs you've used in the book?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They are genuine. I'm in a couple of them, I believe. I was on flamethrowers, the patrols, several different things. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Mobile Riverine Force. Everybody always thinks of the PBR boats running up and down the rivers. Well, that was all part of it, but we had some larger craft, and they would carry, I think it was 44 troops inside the thing, like a landing craft from World War.
Okay, sure, yes.
A lot more guns and armament on it, but they would come and they would drop us off at islands or the other side of a river or canal, going up and down them. Some of the canals were so small the boat couldn't even turn around when it went up there. So what do you do when there's 6 boats in a row and the enemy is shooting at you? You gotta go through.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's mainly what we did. That's why the photos are there. One of the photos that I know I sent you, and I don't know if it's in the book or not, I'll say that straight out, was a place called Dongtam.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which was way down in the Delta. And it was actually a small puddle that came off of the Mekong River, and the Navy and I believe the Corps of Engineers were in on it too, in the Seabees. They pumped out sand like crazy to build that place. And it had a inlet and a open water place where they could pull all the boats up inside and they could get repairs. The crews and even the Army guys had a place they could go eat a warm meal. And we say warm meal, it wasn't a sea ration that we left out in the sun.
Yes. Yeah, that's the heated meal. That's the meal of the day. And all of these stories and so much more in the book Nightmares by our guest on the program, Paul Kasper. I mentioned what soldiers went through during the Vietnam War. This is that true story. When you sat down to write this, did did the stories come back to you? I would assume that they did. I guess what I'm asking, when you sat down to write at the computer, did they all come rushing back to you, and you could probably do it rather quickly?
They did, and I changed most of the names, as you can tell, I'm
Yes.
sure. And that was because some of the guys didn't make it back, and I didn't want their names, to affect their family or something like that with what occurred. But it came back real easy because the term nightmares is what we go through at night, part of PTSD. And so I thought that was an appropriate title for it. And people will ask, well, when's the last time you were in Vietnam? I go, about 2 nights ago. What were you doing?
Yeah. It's sort of hard for most people to realize that that's something that you lived with. And some would think, well, maybe as time passes, it's easier. I get the impression it is not any easier, no matter how much time passes.
No. I've seen grown men sit and cry because they just get tired of the nightmares or getting flashbacks, etc. And I'm even talking World War II and Korean veterans,
Yes.
because I deal with all of the guys, especially when I was commander to VFW in a couple places. You get talking to the guys, and it really is a brotherhood, because we say it's my brother of a different mother or something like that. But once you've been in combat with somebody, you have a uniqueness, sort of like your high school group, the ones you went to school with all your 12 years or whatever.
Yes.
They become your brothers or your friends. Well, when you go into combat and somebody is shooting at you, and the other gentleman is dependent on what you do, and the reverse, that the situation makes a very close-knit family, and only one can talk about another. I saw a poster for years, and I haven't seen it in several years now, but it says, if you weren't there, you won't get it.
And that pretty well sums it up. Our guest on the program is Paul Kasper. This remarkable book called Nightmares. It's available at Amazon. If you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you can link on directly to information on Paul's book. Mentioned in the beginning how references to Vietnam seem to shrink as new textbooks come out in schools as time goes by. In general, how is history? Does it do an accurate portrayal of what went on in Vietnam?
Not really, because they all think that we were either Rambo or that we were on drugs and, crazy and shooting people for no reason and all of that. And they're starting to say the same thing about the gentlemen that are in Iraq right now and the ladies. It's that happens. It happens World War I, World War II, the Civil War, etc. But it's such a minute piece. But nowadays the press grabs that part and hangs on to it because that's the one that sells the headlines.
Yes.
More blood, more gore sells the papers.
You talk about PTSD, and it's a fascinating area that so many people talk about and maybe misunderstood. What exactly is PTSD, and do they know a cause? Is there a reason why this seems to happen?
It not only happens to combat vets, but it also happens to people that are mugged and robbed, people that are shot for no apparent reason in the cities here. Ladies that are raped. I understand there's been some cases where men were raped too, But it's an occurrence that's out of the norm that affects you so that you are hesitant from then on to be without it. Now, with combat, most of the guys are staying at least a year. World War II, they went for the duration pretty much. But when you see that every day, and you go through that every day, especially, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, you're talking 18 to 25-year-olds on the average. So now, that's not what an 18 to 25-year-old goes through that isn't in the military and combat.
Right.
So it's a complete shock to their system mentally, and it takes its toll because, they've had to possibly shoot someone, and they wouldn't have done that in civilian life. at least not without going to jail and being ostracized. So now you've got combat veterans who can't talk to people here unless they're another vet who understands it. Uh,
How do
and
you?
Go ahead, sir.
No, I was just going to say, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm thinking as you're talking there, how do you deal with taking another human life? How do you deal with being with someone that you're just with who loses their life? A friend, as you say, a brother you're with that has lost their life. How do you deal with that? How did you deal with that?
Well, what you learn to do is that taking another life, it's either his or yours.
Yes.
And we say his, could be a female, on both sides nowadays. But the same token, if it's one of your friends that goes, it affects you, but you look back at what happened to them to die. You know, were they shot? Did they hit a grenade? Did they hit now they call them IEDs, we call them booby traps. You know, and if it was a booby trap, you learn to watch for that spot. You're not going to do that.
Yes.
And so the same thing with getting shot. Was he standing up out in the open, or was he hidden down in a bunker, so we say?
With us, yeah, well, Paul Kasper is with us on the program. His book is Nightmares. Paul, while we're talking, and for the video version, that your camera moved just a little bit. If you could drop that down just a notch there, we can get you back in the center screen. Well done. I appreciate that. If you go to our YouTube, the This Week in America channel, go to our website, and you can click on the video version we're doing of the program. We talked about the Vietnam War and being diminished in stature in terms of recognition in a lot of the history books. How about the public sentiment of the Vietnam veterans? Has that changed over the years, do you think?
It has, and it's been the Vietnam veteran who has changed it. When we came back, you know, we were baby killers. Nobody wanted to be around us. Even 20 years later, I remember asking a young lady out, and she says, "You're a Vietnam veteran, right?" "Yes." "Then I'm not going out with you."
An amazing reaction.
Yeah, and that's all it had nothing to do with what I looked like, what I had said or done. It was just that I was part of that group and put into that little group and ostracized, as we were talking about. You've heard this welcome home that one vet does to another, or people do. That was started by the Vietnam veterans for the guys that went to the Gulf War and other things. And it was because we wouldn't let another veteran go through what we did. Because no matter what, when they come home, we're there to meet the airplanes if we can. I've given barbecues for the guys when their unit comes back. All kinds of things. And it's not charged, it's all free. We get people to donate it, or we pay for it out of our pockets. Because, like I say, we don't want them to be stuck in a corner like we were, or called names, etc. So, you know, you have to do what you can to change that stereotype.
Yes. Boy, time is going by way so quickly here. I want to talk about another portrayal of the Vietnam War, and that's what we see in movies. How accurate is that when you see, and I shouldn't lump all of them together, but you see a movie that uses the Vietnam War in a storyline? Is it generally accurate or not?
It depends on which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, we'll talk about Apocalypse Now. You know, it's based on somewhat of a true story, but it wasn't one special forces guy that went. A couple of the guys on the boat were on pot. Stepping off the boat, you may run into a tiger. That's true. You know, Vietnam is like Australia. It's got more deadly things than any place else, let alone the enemy building places for you to fall into. But yeah, like I say, you look at the different ones. I'll give you one to watch sometime, and I'm not going to tell you anything about it except that it's called Jacob's Ladder.
Okay.
And the CIA at one time was giving drugs to people to see how they would react. in stressful situations. And that's basically what it's about. But you don't know that until the end.
Jacob's Ladder is the book that is the movie that Paul is talking about. A couple minutes left in the program, and we certainly cannot do it justice. May have to do a follow-up on this, but I want to talk about Agent Orange exposure. That's something that we heard a lot about, and for many people, they're not clear exactly what it is they're talking about. What are the problems with Agent Orange? What are the symptoms? What does it cause? What about Agent Orange exposure? How bad are the side effects?
There are several things that it comes under. The veterans advocates and the groups like the Vietnam Veterans of America and the VFW and the Disabled American Veterans are trying to get more illnesses listed. One of the things that comes is neuropathy, which is part of why my legs keep jumping. They're numb from the thighs down. I mean, I've broken toes and didn't even know it. But Agent Orange is a blanket term. It's actually 15 different chemicals that were separate, not necessarily mixed together, but
right.
Separate. And the barrels were painted orange. And that's why it's called Agent Orange, because of the barrels is all it is. And just recently it was passed where what we call deep water sailors, which means, like in my case, the waters were just inland waters. We rarely went outside the coastal area. Where the blue water sailors, as we call them, they were on the big destroyers that couldn't fit into those places. Aircraft carriers, the larger battleships, many different craft fall into that. And they have recently been approved for it because if you think about it, if you're off the coast of Vietnam in our case, and where you're going to go to get supplies, where you're going to go to town, and they make their own ice on the boats, but where does the fresh water come from? If they don't have I can't think of the word where you convert salt water to fresh water.
Oh, yes, you know what I mean, yes.
Yeah. If you don't have that, they're going in and picking up 1,500 gallons, 2,000 gallons, or whatever. The fruit, because we were trying to help their economy with the good guys, they go buy it, and the next day the guys would have it in meal plates on the ship. So they were exposed in a sense. And, they swam in the water. Well, we all know that the water from the freshwater places come out into the ocean. And so
yes.
There it came,
Yeah, there's so much in the book, and I wish we had more time, and there's so much more that we could talk about. It's Nightmares by Paul Kasper. Are you planning a sequel to the book? Will there be a follow-up?
I've already written one sequel, and some of my friends have asked me, because they enjoyed what I did write, to write more. And so I'm contemplating, shall we say, trying to sit down and do it on the computer this time, to write one about the flamethrower section, what we did with the flamethrowers, how they worked, how the combat went with them, and what they were utilized for. Also, some of my friends are aircraft pilots, helicopter pilots. Where I'm living right now is just outside Fort Rucker, which is where the Army and some of the other branches come to learn to fly helicopters.
Okay.
So, I know them all real well.
Yes. Well, I contemplating, I'm going to take that as a yes. There's a good chance that we will see another follow-up there to Paul's book.
Got like I say, the one done where he comes home and what he goes through there.
Well, I'm anxious to have a chance to read that and hopefully talk about it as well. This book we're talking about is Nightmares. You'll find it, of course, at Amazon, the usual places, written by our guest, Paul Kasper. If you're going to Google that's Kasper, Kasper. Paul, this has been a pleasure to have you with us on the program. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again. Thank you for being with us and sharing these stories on the program today.
I thank you for the time, sir.
It is our pleasure. Paul Kasper, author of Nightmares. The book's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the usual places. You can link on directly to the Amazon link by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And we're back on today's program after these messages.